They pulled her body from the pool. Her spine was shattered, her organs crushed. She hadn't drowned. She had been dragged, tossed, and suffocated by the very creature she trusted most. There was no breach, no alarm, no warning, just the quiet sound of filtered water. The last place she was seen alive, lying on her back next to the tank, smiling, waiting for her turn in the show. When emergency crews arrived, they found her lifeless body wedged at the bottom of the pool, her uniform torn, her arm detached, her eyes still open. The killer was circling above, calm, still, watching. But this wasn't just any attack. This wasn't a wild animal striking a stranger. This was personal, because the woman in that water wasn't just a trainer. She was his caretaker, his playmate, his supposed partner. And yet, she became his prey. This is the haunting story of Kendra Hale, a gifted marine mammal trainer who believed that trust and routine could tame nature's fiercest predator. Welcome to Wild Shock Files. If you care about truth, animals, and the line where spectacle meets survival, make sure to subscribe, like, and stay until the end. She spent 14 years working with orcas at Bluefall Marine Park, nestled along the scenic cliffs of Sonoma County, California. Kendra was more than just a performer. She was an advocate, a believer, someone who genuinely thought that mutual respect could bridge the gap between man and beast. From a young age, Kendra had been captivated by the ocean. She wasn't interested in dolphins or sea lions like most kids. She was drawn to the orca, the black and white apex predator of the sea, intelligent, powerful, enigmatic. After earning a degree in marine biology, she started at Bluefall as an intern, scrubbing decks and sorting fish. But her passion was undeniable. Within a few years, she had worked her way up to senior orca trainer, spending hours every day in the water with the animals she adored, especially one, Tyro. Tyro was a 7,000-pound male orca, massive, moody, and unpredictable. But to Kendra, he was family. They had a bond built over years of reinforcement training, synchronized routines, and quiet moments before the crowd poured in. But even the strongest bond can break. On July 8, 2022, during a routine afternoon practice, something shifted. Something no one saw coming, or perhaps no one wanted to see. Witnesses say Kendra had just finished a backflip entry into the tank. She was floating near the surface, laughing, signaling Tyro with her right hand. He circled once, twice, then dove. Moments later, a sudden splash. Not from the choreography, but from chaos. Tyro shot upward, grabbing her by the torso. The glass trembled, the water churned, and then silence. The other trainers screamed. Guests were evacuated. Rescue divers plunged in, but it was already too late. Her injuries were devastating: a collapsed ribcage, internal bleeding, a dislocated spine. One of her arms was found floating several feet away. She never stood a chance. So what went wrong? How did a woman who dedicated her life to these creatures end up being torn apart by one? And more importantly, was it preventable? This story isn't just about Kendra. It's about the illusion of control, the cost of captivity, and the predators we pretend we've tamed. Tyro wasn't like the others. He was born in the wild off the coast of British Columbia, captured at just 3 years old, and shipped to Bluefall Marine Park in 1997. From the moment he arrived, he was a challenge. Distant, uncooperative, easily agitated. Trainers described him as aloof, brooding, and too intelligent for comfort. But he was beautiful, a towering dorsal fin, perfect saddle patch, a silent, drifting shadow with eyes that seemed to judge everyone who approached. Over time, Bluefall turned him into a star. High jumps, tail slaps, crowd-pleasing stunts that made headlines. But behind the scenes, Tyro's record was far from clean. There were 5 documented incidents before Kendra's death: a sudden drag during a private session, a bite mark on a trainer's wetsuit, a refusal to respond to commands mid-show. Each time, the park blamed miscommunication. Each time, Tyro was returned to the water. And then came incident number 6, the one no one walked away from. Kendra knew the risks. She'd been working with Tyro for over 3 years. She had seen his moods shift like tides, She had documented his agitation. She had even, multiple times, voiced concerns about getting in the water with him again. But management had a different priority. His behavior's improved. He's ready. He loves you, Kendra. Love. That word gets thrown around a lot in marine parks. As if affection can be coaxed with sardines and backflips. As if these 7,000-pound apex predators, armed with intelligence, memory, and muscle, can be truly domesticated. That day, the stadium was half full. A Thursday matinee. Tourists with popcorn, families with cameras, kids pressing up against glass, waiting for Tyro's signature breach. Kendra entered the pool at 2:17 p.m., smiling, wearing the wetsuit with the park's logo on the back. Tyro floated nearby, silent, still, watching. They began a standard routine: hand signals, fluke waves, a shallow dive. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. At 2:21 p.m., Tyro stopped responding. He sank beneath the surface, then rose slowly beneath Kendra. There was no thrashing, no dramatic lunge, no cinematic splash, just a sudden vertical lift as Tyro surged from below and clamped his jaws around Kendra's torso. It was clinical, deliberate. In under 8 seconds, he crushed her ribs, punctured her lungs, and dragged her beneath the water. Spectators thought it was part of the show. Children clapped. Some even laughed, until they noticed the trail of red unfurling in the turquoise water. Then came the screaming. Trainers on deck froze for a beat too long, paralyzed between disbelief and rehearsed emergency protocols. By the time they activated the recall buzzer, a loud underwater tone meant to signal orcas to return to their holding pool. Tyro wasn't listening. He circled slowly, still holding her body. Blood floated to the surface in small bursts. Park management ushered spectators out through side exits. Some people filmed, others cried. One woman fainted. It took over 35 minutes for the Marine Park's emergency dive team to enter the pool, armed with distraction tools, decoy fish buckets, underwater noisemakers. They tried to lure Tyro away. Eventually, he released her. Not gently. He let her sink, limp and lifeless, near the filtration vents. When divers recovered Kendra's body, she was beyond saving. Paramedics didn't even attempt CPR. Her internal injuries were too extensive, her airway crushed. She had drowned after the fatal bite had already made survival impossible. Tyro was led back into isolation. They said it was for observation. No statement was made to the press for 18 hours. No public acknowledgement of Tyro's history. No mention of the previous close calls. Just a sterile release. We are deeply saddened by the tragic loss of a beloved trainer. Within 48 hours, Bluefall posted a tribute video to Kendra, complete with soft piano music and slow-motion clips of her smiling beside Tyro. What they didn't show? The blood in the water, the silence in the crowd, the Marine Mammal Division quietly packing up and moving operations out of public view. But the questions didn't go away. Because if it happened to Kendra, it could happen again. To truly understand what went wrong that day, we have to step back and ask a deeper question. What happens to an apex predator when you strip it of everything it evolved to be? In the wild, orcas are astonishingly intelligent, highly social creatures. They live in tightly bonded matrilineal pods, families that travel, hunt, and communicate using unique dialects passed down through generations. Some orca pods have been tracked covering hundreds of miles in a single week. Others dive to immense depths or coordinate complex hunting strategies, rivaling the intelligence of primates. But in captivity, a 7,000-pound orca like Tyro is confined to a tank barely a fraction of the space he'd roam in a single day. He's cut off from the ocean's sonic landscape, replaced by filtered water, echoing walls, and the steady hum of pumps. His social world? Gone. Any companions are chosen artificially, often from different subspecies that wouldn't even interact in the wild. Isolation, artificial stimulation, and repetitive performance routines gradually warp their natural behavior. Dr. Naomi Rose, a marine mammal scientist with the Animal Welfare Institute, has spent decades studying orca behavior in both wild and captive settings. She's been clear: captivity imposes stressors that are chronic and cumulative. It leads to abnormal behaviors that we rarely, if ever, see in the wild. And when those stressors collide with sheer physical power, the consequences can be devastating for both the animal and the humans who care for them. Marine biologist Dr. Ingrid Visser, founder of the Orca Research Trust, agrees. Orcas are not inherently aggressive toward humans in the wild. The majority of documented incidents occur in captivity. These animals are expressing trauma, not natural hostility. So what happened with Tyro wasn't a freak accident. It wasn't unpredictable. It was inevitable. And yet for years the show went on. The official report of Kendra's death was brief, too brief. The language, clinical. Kendra Hale, 27, suffered fatal injuries during an interaction with Orca Tyro at Bluefall Marine Park. No mention of ripped wetsuit fibers embedded in Tyro's teeth. No mention of the half-hour delay before paramedics were allowed near the tank. No mention of Tyro dragging Kendra underwater twice after the fatal blow. Bluefall's legal team moved fast. The narrative was shaped immediately. This was a tragic accident, a momentary lapse, an unpredictable event in an otherwise loving relationship. And Kendra? They called her a hero of marine education. They released a commemorative program. They named a training platform after her. But behind closed doors, the story was anything but celebratory. Kendra's family was furious. They demanded access to the full security footage. It was denied. They requested internal documents showing Tyro's behavioral warnings, redacted. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit, settled quietly, with an NDA attached so tight it erased Kendra's voice from the public record. And still, the tank remained full. Tyro continued performing after just 6 weeks of behavioral rehabilitation. The shows resumed, the lights turned on, the crowd clapped. Maybe a little softer now, but they clapped. But something had changed. Whispers started in the trainer community. Private Facebook groups filled with former Marine Park employees began sharing stories. A dolphin shoved a handler into a wall. A sea lion bit through a glove and wouldn't let go. A second orca, Maya, began swimming in tight, endless circles. Whispers turned to movement. Animal rights groups reignited old campaigns. Former trainers, emboldened by Kendra's death, began speaking out. And across the internet, a single phrase echoed louder than ever: captivity kills. In the weeks following Kendra Hale's death, the headlines burned hot, then faded, as they always do. But the damage had already rippled out. Protests began forming outside Bluefall Marine Park, small at first. Signs with slogans like, "Justice for Kendra," "Tanks are torture." Tyro didn't snap, he broke. News crews returned, not for the shows, but for the outrage. Every appearance of Tyro now carried a shadow. Was he a killer or a victim? Bluefall tried to pivot. They updated their safety protocols, banned waterwork indefinitely, and launched a new initiative called Understanding Orcas, filled with smiling staff and colorful brochures. But the public didn't buy it. Attendance dropped by nearly 30% in the first year. Sponsorships quietly pulled out. Local lawmakers began pressing for oversight. And through it all, Tyro remained. Still in the tank, still circling the glass, still silent. They tried to give him a new trainer. She lasted 3 months before resigning. In one particularly haunting show, Tyro swam out, stopped mid-performance, and refused to move. Just floated. Thousands watched as the music played, and he did nothing. They called it depression. Experts called it institutional trauma, but others called it something darker, memory. Because Tyro, like all orcas, never forgets. And what about the legacy of Kendra Hale? Her name disappeared from Bluefall brochures. Her memorial platform was quietly renamed 6 years later. When a documentary crew visited in 2023, park officials declined interviews. But for those who knew her, Kendra's story didn't fade. Former colleagues now speak at marine advocacy panels. Her younger sister launched a nonprofit for trainer safety reform. And in online forums, Kendra's name is etched beside those of others who gave their lives inside marine tanks. Not just as a trainer, but as a symbol of what happens when wildness is confined, of what happens when we ignore the cracks in a glass prison, of what happens when we mistake submission for peace. And Tyro, as of today, he remains at Bluefall. Older now, scarred, and perhaps still waiting for a freedom he was never promised. In the end, this was never just about one orca, or one trainer, or one tragic day in 2022 or 2016. It's about the invisible boundaries between awe and arrogance, about how far we're willing to go for spectacle and how often we ignore the cost. Kendra Hale loved orcas. She believed in connection, in understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that belief blinded her to the danger. But it's not just the animals who are caged. Sometimes the people are too. Caged by contracts, caged by corporate silence, caged by the need to pretend everything is under control, even when it clearly isn't. So the next time you see a show, remember this. Behind every perfect spin, behind every splash of applause, there's a creature remembering the open ocean, and a trainer who may be risking everything to bring magic to the surface. Kendra Hale didn't die because Tyro turned wild. She died because he was never meant to be tame. Thanks for watching Wild Shock Files. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the untamed truth behind the animals we think we understand.